tea's cold.
Oh, I hate it when that happens.
Come
Yeah.
with us on a journey
Yeah,
into
I
the
gotta put a
unknown,
microwave in here.
the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash.
Well, it's gone.
Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Ghost Chronicles, the medium rare edition. I am Ron Kozik, your host, the gatekeeper around the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable, the mystical, the magical, the macabre, New England's own Van Helsing. And with me is my lovely co-host, the author of a medium rare herself, the proprietor of Positively Brilliant, the lovely Lesley Martin.
That is me.
There you
Wow, what
go.
an introduction. Thanks so much.
That's pretty much the same one I give Steve.
Just say everything that they do and
Yeah,
let them
yeah. No,
bask in the
no, no.
glory.
I tell him how lovely he is.
It's a good way to keep them around.
Anyways, yeah. So, what's her face? Lesley. Yeah, Lesley. Lesley and I had a busy week this week. We went to the red light seance last night, of course, which we tried some new experiment, which is being supervised by Steve Parsons in the UK. And we also on Saturday we went to the Peabody Essex Museum to look at the spiritualist exhibit up there, which is really cool. And then we stopped by this really cool museum in Salem called the Ouija Board Museum, I believe it is. And joining us from that very museum is the proprietor himself and collector, John, oh God, Kozik. Did I get that right?
You got it right. Yeah, nice
Yeah.
job.
Wow.
Thanks for having me.
I am proud of me. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining us. And, for a small museum, that is absolutely well worth seeing. I mean, there is so much involved in there. And you have so many amazing things that, it's certainly definitely seen. So if people want to visit Salem and go to the museum, how can they find you?
Well, I'm right on the main street, 127 Essex Street. That's really the street that most things happen on. Most of the shops, which
Yeah.
shops are there. But I'm in the back of a store called Remember Salem. So you have to go into this store, which is sells Harry Potter items. And it
Mhm.
looks a little weird, but you go in there and you gain access to the museum in the
Yeah,
back.
you knock 3 times and said Joe sent me, and then you get to go in the back.
100%. It's meant to be a speakeasy. What I like about it is, the people that come to the museum tend to seek it out. They've heard, word of mouth, and
Mhm.
you either stumble upon it or you kind of are seeking it out. And I think it makes it really special because most museums you're aware of, they kind of take your money, get in, get you out.
Yeah,
And the Salem Witch Board Museum, the Ouija Museum, is very much meant to be people asking as many questions as they like, hearing stories, and I kind of guide them through very specific to what I think they're going to be most interested in
yeah.
based on questions they have or where they're from and things like that. So
Mhm.
it's a little bit different than most museums.
Yeah, John can really talk too, so you're going to learn a lot, whether you want to or not.
No,
No,
that's
just kidding.
100%. No. I can tell. The people are like, oh, he's going to talk about the history, oh, it's kind of boring dates and names, but then I'll turn it and we'll get into the good stuff and talk
Yeah.
about murders and suicides and all those other fun things about the Ouija board.
And so, do you have a website or anything, John?
Yep, SalemWitchBoardMuseum.com.
Okay, I got to get that, put that up on our
Yeah, and
website.
usually Instagram and Facebook is where I post a little more active
Mhm.
than anywhere else.
So, tell us a little bit about the museum. Exactly what is the museum?
Well, the museum started in 2019, and it's the world's only Ouija museum. And I really focus on
Not anymore.
what's that?
Not anymore.
Not
There's
anymore. No, no, no,
one
no.
in Baltimore.
No, I did open a second location back in May down in Baltimore, but the museum in Salem is really meant to tell the history, and that's everything in between. It's not just, the founding members, the people that started the Ouija brand, or where talking boards come from, the generic name, but really every aspect of the pop culture influence to it, to, of course, scarier, spookier stories with paranormal experiences with some of the boards and things like that. So, like I said, pretty unique to be able to not just find a place that talks about Ouija boards, but really you can kind of hear everything there is to know about it in one place.
Yeah, and Lesley, you're still with me, right?
I am still with you. I have a
Okay.
question for you, John.
Yeah.
Good.
You-
Speak up
I-
because we'll just keep going.
do you have any strange happenings in your building where you're located?
I do have quite a few actually, and it started way before Ouija boards were even in the building. As I set the space up, I had a lot of people from the neighborhood come by and didn't really know each other, but they told me very similar stories that they had felt something in the back. They next door to us is the wand shop where they make uh, these handmade wands in the basement, and the person who does that, he has told stories of like being touched, pushed, scratched, and seeing things in the basement. And people coming into the museum before it was a museum telling me similar stories. The owner of the space, he actually doesn't go into the basement.
Huh.
So where in the back part of the museum where there's a couch is the same area where I kind of put donated boards that were donated. The previous owners had a bad experience with them. And that side of the room in particular, really, people get a lot of reactions. Everything from, pressure in their head or their sinuses, getting dizzy, people pass out, people get sick, a lot of weird things with technology where, phones and Polaroids and even watches stopping on that side or not working properly. So quite a bit of things do happen in the museum.
Back in 2010, I had the opportunity to investigate your basement with John Zaffis and Andrew Calder. And we had some interesting things during our investigation as well. I was wondering if there were still things happening in there since then. So
Yeah,
have you experienced anything firsthand?
I have not. I've only witnessed, things happen to other people, but nothing's affected me at all. What's funny is, if you investigated back in 2010, then you're aware that the building has history long before the Ouija Museum for paranormal activity. Just the other day, an employee who's worked there for about 6 months or so, he came up from the basement and he thought that the person upstairs was talking to him. He's like, "Did you just call me?" She's like, "No." And he's like, "I kept hearing 'get out,' yelling to me." And which is one of the more common things, not only with investigators who have come through and heard that on recordings, but just hearing voices in the space itself. But for me personally, nothing has happened. And it's kind of funny that you just mentioned John Zaffis because up until a couple years ago, I kind of just thought that nothing happens to me. It wasn't my luck. But when I heard John talk at a panel at a convention one time, someone had asked him like, "Well, how do you take items that are considered, cursed and evil, negative, haunted, and take them, put them into your collection, and nothing happens to you?" And his answer was, "Well, I don't feed it negativity, and I only show it love." And for me, the Ouija board, I don't view it as an evil thing. I look at it the same way you look at the intent you put to a car or a gun, what you want to do with the item. And so I only show love to these boards. I love talking about them. I love people coming in and learning about them. So I don't feed it any kind of negativity whatsoever. And I think that might be a reason why nothing happens for me.
That's happens to a lot of people too. I mean, there are other collectors out there because collecting is very nuanced now, and so there's. But way before that, I mean, like myself, over the years, people would get these things and like Ouija boards, haunted Ouija boards that are cursed, and they'd give it to people like me and you and other people in the field back then, and we would have them and have no problems whatsoever with them. And I absolutely believe the same way you do is you actually empower the board more than the board is its entity in itself. I mean, I got uh, called into my parish priest one time because I was a steward at the church, and he we were going to do this thing, and so he looked me up the internet, and of course he found all kinds of interesting things about me. So I got called in. I was there for about an hour and a half, or maybe more, And one of the questions he asked me, what do you think of Ouija boards? And the first thing I said is, I collect them. You realize they're only a game. And that's what I said to him, because I don't empower Ouija boards. I just collect them. I think they're interesting. The story behind them, the backstories behind them are fine, but it's not anything that I fear or worry about. So there, I don't empower them. Therefore, there really isn't something to be concerned about, in my opinion. Do you feel the same way?
For me, oh, I absolutely do. I obviously feel the same way as you. I'm curious, Lesley, what your thoughts are, though. Do you have the similar feelings towards them?
Uh-huh. That's a good one.
Absolutely. I think that you bring to whatever you're doing with this, the energy that you're bringing to it is what the energy you're going to get.
Yep.
Ghost dog.
Not mine.
That's my lovely Hank Steve in the back.
So you wanted to put his two cents in. But, I mean, the Ouija board, you hear so many stories. Hollywood has definitely a lot to do with it. But I think also, teenage girls, I think, have probably the most when they have these slumber parties and they take out the Ouija board and they start messing around with it and they have these experiences. And then that's where it keeps growing and growing, is where I believe anyways, that's where it really came. I mean, because back in the olden days when they first formed, where they were just really, the whole family would get together and go on these Ouija boards. And the Exorcist, of course, killed everything, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's another story. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think most people never viewed the Ouija board as an evil or negative thing. And, certainly in the museum, I can show references to pretty mainstream magazines and newspapers that depict it, as family entertainment or couples getting together, women sadly using them alone to speak to a deceased husband during wartime, something like that. And not on a mainstream level where people having bad reactions to it. Of course, bad things do happen from the very beginning, but the media did not portray it in that way, really, up until probably post Exorcist at that point.
So the Hollywood effect. The Hollywood effect.
Yes.
So you have the Ouija. Have you ever used the Ouija board? Let me ask you that straight up.
Well, to be honest with you, the Ouija doesn't work very well for me.
Okay.
The way I even became interested was I inherited my grandmother's Ouija board.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, she used it alone and she flew on it. She could go so fast and would yell out letters and numbers quicker than anyone could write down what she was saying. But that board, it doesn't work for me the same way. And I believe the Ouija boards work. I believe they work differently for everyone, and that you influence the board. And so for me personally, I'm so nervous about the board not working for me that I'm going to influence into not working for me. But a couple of years ago, I decided I will use the Ouija. I'm really just waiting at this point to use it with my friend Karen. Karen Dahlman, she's also a director for the Talking Board Historical Society, and she's used the Ouija for 50 years. Never had a bad experience, gets really positive, inspirational messages. And I've been at paranormal conventions with her where the boards weren't working for people, and she would put her hand on theirs and the planchette would take off. She'd take her hand off and it would continue working. And I saw that happen over and over again. And so I feel most confident that if the board is going to work for me, it's going to work with her. So
yeah, we call that jump starting, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's truly what it was, jump starting. Yeah.
Yeah, we've experienced that too. I mean, we've done various workshops and stuff where people have had that difficulty. We've gone up to them and touched it, or even put our finger on the Ouija board, the planchette, and also other things too, other methods of divination. But the information, it's so weird because the Ouija will come up with stuff. Now, where it comes from, I'm not quite sure. I'm almost 99.9% sure it's all through us. It's all through the individuals on the board. I remember one particular time at a lighthouse that a big long story, but anyways, the Ouija board told me I was going to die that night, and
but you didn't.
I didn't, I guess. least that I know of anyway. Maybe I'm dead in the maybe it's like the others. I'm dead and they don't anyway. So yeah. So you don't use the wood, but you do collect them and you sell them there as well, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have quite a bit for sale, probably more than any other place. A mix of like new stuff that starts, pretty low in cost, and then
Right.
I got vintage and antique stuff that goes back to 1891.
Oh
So
wow.
probably any given time, there's dozens for sale there. But right now, I just got done buying a pretty large collection, a collector who decided to sell everything, and I just purchased that. So I'm sitting on over 300 vintage and antique Ouija
Oh
boards
God bless you.
that I sell at the museum, which I really don't mail order them. What I think is it gives everyone the best experience when they come to the museum, that not only do they get like a very personalized kind of tour and they get to know me a little bit and I get to know them, but then they have the chance to buy these things that, you won't find. You could go to 100 antique stores or flea markets, yard sales, whatever, and you might find one Parker Brothers Ouija. So it makes it a nice, unique situation to have the possibility of buying, quite a few antique vintage ones there.
Yeah. And
John, do you find that people gravitate toward one single board, like they have a bunch in front of them and then they just like, oh, that one's for me? Is it like the
No.
Ouija board seeks them out?
Yeah, I think there's a process. I don't, I've gotten to be pretty good over the years because I talk it out with people because everyone's kind of different. And I meet people that, won't use an antique or vintage board. They feel as though there's an attachment to it. So they want to make sure that it's brand new, it's never been used. And then some people really want to seek something made of wood because they believe it's closer to the earth and it'll work better for them. And then some people have beliefs that even the planchette that they sell with the hole in the middle, if that piece of plastic is missing, they believe that it's broken, it won't work at all. Even though it's a hole, the hole's a hole. But so I kind of go through and start asking questions to people to what they're drawn to if they see something, or they want to talk it out and kind of figure it out because everything from people traveling and they can't grab a larger board, they want to fit in their suitcase, to if they're from a certain city and I have something that was made in that city, 100 years ago or whatever, then they're drawn to that. So I kind of help people decide what might work. And most people I meet are coming to use the Ouija. So it's a little bit different than collecting where you're like, okay, it doesn't have the original planchette that got lost or broken. People want to use the board, so to have the planchette with it is very important. And you're probably familiar, especially Ron, if you're collecting, there's a lot of boards that have come out that kind of fold out.
yep,
And they're great for travel, but for using them, the
not
folds a
so.
lot of times they come like speed bumps, so to speak, when you're
Yep.
using it. And so I talk people out of that. If it's their first Ouija, they probably don't want to buy something like that. They want to use something that's, gonna lay flat and the planchette's gonna glide pretty smooth. Once they use it for a while and get used to it, they could possibly switch over to something like that. But so I not one board for every person. It really is, what you're drawn to. And if you feel something's going to work better for you than something else, I mean, that probably will influence it in that way that it will.
Yeah.
Um,
And go ahead.
I was going to say, well, when I am thrifting or if I'm out in antiquing and I come across a Ouija board, I usually don't find the planchette with it. Do you find that is the case usually, that there's no planchette with it?
Yeah, I mean, once you get pre-1960s, the boxes that these came in, they were like sleeves, paper sleeves.
Oh
And
yeah.
once you put it was up to a lot of times it was up to the customer to put the legs into the planchette themselves. And so if you didn't use enough glue, if you didn't do it properly, then when it was together, you couldn't really put it back in the original sleeve. So they started going into different boxes, different drawers. So they were separated almost from the very beginning. And to find, no matter how rare one of these boards are, especially those competitors to Ouija, those other brands, the board is rare, but the planchette is always much more rare.
Mm. My
Now the
mother, my
Go
mother
ahead.
being English, she thinks different than, I would, but she always thought that the power was not in the Ouija board itself, but it was in the planchette. Do you find that people feel that over here, or is that just my mom's feelings?
No, I mean, I don't hear it very often, but certainly I have heard that before. And what's funny is, we were talking earlier a little bit about The Exorcist and, people's beliefs and rules and things like that. And a couple of years ago, a horror movie called Ouija Origin of Evil um, came out. And there's a scene where the little girl looks through the eye of the planchette and sees who she's been talking with on the Ouija board.
Oh yeah.
Now I meet people who come to the museum, and the planchettes I sell from the museum, they don't have the hole in them. You look at the point, and they'll be like, no, 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 I need to have the hole in it now. So they do start to believe that the planchette is more powerful than the board itself. That is with that movie reference, that's what they're going to try to do.
Never thought about looking through the hole.
Oh, you never saw that movie? That's a cool
No,
movie.
no.
Well,
Yeah.
cool for being crap. But yeah, I mean, it's so there's so many different variations of the Ouija too. And so I always call it a Ouija board. You say Ouija, which is the proper pronunciation, I assume, right, John?
Correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
people, I can't say it's like different part of the country or things like that, but the brand itself, the first mass manufactured board that was produced, talking board being a generic name, was Ouija, and it's pronounced that way. But if you ask someone if they use the board, you would ask them if they Ouija. So you
Ah, there you go.
Ouija on a Ouija, you verb on the noun.
Oh, there you go. And it's so funny, but they actually did rip offs on the word Ouija as
Yes.
well. Yes, there are several boards that are called Ouija boards with the actual spelling here.
Yeah, there's a few boards that have come out over the years where they've tried to spell it as Ouija.
Yep.
And what happens is, Ouija it's a trademark and
Mhm.
owned by Hasbro today, but whoever owned it, at the time, spelling it Ouija, the manufacturer thinks they're going to be able to get around it, but
Right.
that would actually infringe on the trademark. So there's a lot
Really?
of times there's litigation about that, and any board you see that says Ouija on it would be pretty rare because in most cases they were probably hit with a cease and assist or at least told not to produce any more of them.
Isn't there one out there? I think it's a green. Is it green? It begins with a W. In fact, it's Ouija. W.
Oh yeah, there was one sold at the Five Below store. It was spelled WEE-JI. I think that's what you're thinking of. It glowed in the dark. It was just folded out once, but it was a little like a $5 board from that store. And as far as I know, that's one of the few times that Hasbro actually went after somebody.
I wonder if that is the one I have one. That's why I'm trying to think of what it
It's
is.
a
But
small little square box. I'm pretty sure.
yes, it is. Yes, it's a square
Yeah.
box. Yep, definitely a square. I have that. Yeah. So that's the story behind that one. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was, I believe, made in China, and Hasbro
Probably.
did get them to stop producing any more of them.
Ah, yeah, there's so many, but you have variations too. I mean, one of my favorite, and we talked about this when I was at your store the other day, is the Kabbalah. I guess you can call it a Ouija, but whatever. The Kabbalah board game, which is a kind of a variation of the Ouija, right?
Yeah, it's the people making these boards, Ouija's the brand we all think about and know. It was the first one to be mass produced. And
Mhm.
so the other competitors really try their best to either stand out and do something different or kind of maybe copy Ouija pretty closely and sell it for less money. And the Kabbalah is the good example of them like literally throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. It was a very large game. I mean, the box for it itself is probably 30 inches wide and
Yep.
probably, close to 15 to 16 inches tall. And so it had a ball at the bottom. It was a table, plastic table with a ball at the bottom. So they created like a tipping table using it. They also
Mhm.
lined it with tarot cards around the edge. And,
Gotta have those.
yeah, the alphabet was on there, but instead of a planchette, they used a marble. And so as the table rocked back and forth, the marble would move and would supposedly stop at whatever letter they were calling for. Yeah, it seems very not very user friendly, I should say. But I have met people that do prefer to use that board, and I
Oh,
find that pretty interesting. Yeah.
and while we visualize it, imagine the pot in the middle where the thing is. You have a stick going up, basically, with a giant eyeball in it, with a aurora around it, or something, a plastic aurora on the thing. So the thing is amazingly looking. I mean, it's so cool. Um, but yeah, I love that damn thing.
Yeah, it's a nice oddball one, and it was from the '60s, and I think you can kind of sense that when you see it, be like, okay, we're trying different things. I think that specifically that's 1967,
Yeah.
so that Ouija had just outsold Monopoly in '67,
Wow.
and so it was pretty popular. So you can imagine the competitors trying to do their best to compete against it, but you know not very successful to say the least. I don't
Did it glow in the dark? I'm trying to think of that.
I think the eyeball did glow in the dark, if I'm
Yeah,
not
I think so.
mistaken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And then and then you had the one, of course, that didn't come out that many years ago, and that was the one with the railroad spike on it.
Railroad spike in it.
Oh yeah, don't you remember that?
I can't think of it off the top of my head. No.
Oh my God, I have that of those. It's a real railroad spike. It sits on a metal pivot in the middle of the board.
Huh.
Oh God, it's great. I'll see if I can get a picture of it. Well,
Yeah,
it's at my
I,
office, but
I've seen some pretty oddball stuff. That one's not ringing a bell, but
it
um,
came in a round tube with a rubber mat.
huh? No,
Is it
that's
called
not ringing.
something like Spicomancy or something like that?
Something fancy, yeah, something like that too, right?
Yeah,
It's
no,
pretty cool.
yeah, it sounds pretty cool. I'd like to see that. I'm always surprised there. You might, I don't know if you have it in your collection or not, but in the UK, roughly 10 years ago, they did something called the Ouija Spring, and it literally
Oh, I
looks
did
like
see it, but I don't have it.
yeah,
No.
it looks like a sit and spin. If
Hmm.
you're familiar with that game or that ride, whatever you want to call it, from like the 70s and 80s,
Yep.
it's the board, but then out of the center of it is this giant spring that comes up and attaches to a smaller board circle at the top. And I think you hold that top piece, and then through the spring, it can go in any direction to hit the alphabet. It
Hmm.
just seems so weird. And so big. I don't, I
How it would work.
I don't,
Yep.
yeah, how it
Anyways,
would work or who would want to buy
we
it.
do have to take a break right now. We're on our way out, so we'll be back. But we do have to take a break. You're listening to Ghost Chronicles Medium Rare Edition right here on TogiNet, and where all good podcasts go to die. And we're brought to you by Circles of Wisdom, 386 Merrimack Street, Methuen, Massachusetts, the Glant Messier Family Law Group, 15 High Street, North Andover, Massachusetts, and our very good friends on Ghost Chronicles Radio on Patreon. We'll be right back after the following messages.
Do you have a paranormal event, book, or something else you want people to know about? Then why not advertise it on Ghost Chronicles Radio? With over 150,000 downloads a month, get your message out to an audience that's interested in the subject. We have a plan at a cost that fits your needs. For more information, contact Ron Kozik at anyghostproject@comcast.net or call 978-455-6678.
Going to Illinois.
Located in Illinois, there lies a sleepy little town where nothing is a common occurrence.
You going to that party in town tonight? Heck yeah! I only turned 18 once.
Liar, he turn every week.
That is until the night of celebration.
Where the hell is she? Oh no. No, 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 Jessica! What's happening?
From the creators of Shadowhunters, Bite Me, comes a tale of primal terror. grindcore mayhem. Shadow hunters, kill, Jessica, kill!
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Harry Price. I am speaking to you via the medium of the Ghost Box. Many of you will know I carried out the first live radio broadcast from Haunted House way back in 1936 for the BBC. Now, thanks to the wonders of modern technology, I am still able to keep abreast of 21st century ghost hunting by listening to Ghost Chronicles International on TogiNet, ParaX Radio, the Ghost Channel, and even on something called a podcast. Two splendid chaps host it. One is an American who calls himself New England's own Van Helsing, although I have discovered his real name is Ron Kolek. The other is Stephen Parsons, and he's a paranormal scientist. Well, mustache, I'm required elsewhere on something called a K2. But don't forget, I'll be listening in every Tuesday from 8 o'clock in Great Britain and 3 o'clock on the American Eastern Seaboard. I trust you will join me there.
And welcome back. You are listening to Ghost Chronicles, the medium rare edition, with your host Ron Kolek and me, Lesley Martin. And tonight our wonderful guest is John Kozik.
Damn, you do good. You're like the only one that does that. Nobody, Maureen never knows what to say. She says, "We're back." That's it. Anyway, John. First of all, John is the proprietor of the. What's the proper name of this? So I call it the Ouija Museum, but
Yeah, I mean, it is the Ouija Museum, but the real name is the Salem Witch Board Museum.
Salem Witch Board Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my T-shirt says.
Nice.
Okay, there you go. And is there a charge for this?
It is. It's $10 per person, and you know, no, it's not
Well worth
guided, but I am there, and
Yeah.
I am usually guiding people around every day.
It is well worth it. Let me tell you that. There are two museums right now that I think are extremely good bargains, and you get your money worth it. They may not be the biggest ones in the world, but they have the most coolest stuff and the most information, and that's John's Museum. And also the International Cryptoid Museum up in Portland, which is well worth the visit as well. So
Yes, I
not
have to say, when you go into John's museum, the Witchboard Museum, he is so engaging and he's so knowledgeable and he gives you 100% of his attention. And he is such a gracious host, and it's really well worth your time to go in
Yep.
and see him.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I try to make a really unique situation like that. Some of the best places I've ever been to are the smaller museums. I mean, they're very niche. Like the Cryptozoology Museum in Portland is fantastic. I think the only way it could be better is if the guy was around telling you stories of
I
how
agree.
he acquired those things or where these came from, and like some of the backstories. Like sometimes when you go to a museum and you're looking at a piece and you can see a date and things like that, but when you can put it in the context of how it was acquired or what it really means to the bigger picture, I think that's great. But I've been to one of my favorite museums was Dearly Departed, which was out in California, just outside of the Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
Oh yeah, I know that guy. Well, he's a good friend of Marla Brooks, my co-host for the Book of Shadows edition of
Yeah,
Ghost
so,
Chronicles.
Scott Michaels, I believe.
Yeah,
is his
Scott
name.
Michaels. Yeah, exactly. He has
Yeah,
a hearse, and yeah.
Such a fascinating guy, great stories. Every
Mhm.
single piece was a major story and how it was acquired, and I was in awe. I was there for 3 hours and we talked to him for the whole time. He told us the best stories, and he's one of the reasons why I do what I do at the museum is because he had a passion for it, and it just made it much more interesting than just reading something and learning to know more about it. and just being excited when he was excited to tell it. And I think that's what comes through at the Salem Witch Board Museum, is that people maybe not most interested in Ouija boards, but when they meet a guy who's like obsessed to talk about them, it kind of like it gets their attention, and like, wow, here's a guy that all he does for a living is just talk about Ouija boards all day. And he's really excited about it. He hasn't stopped talking, for 45 minutes about them. So I think that's what makes it special. Those smaller museums, you kind of get a little bit different taste than the bigger ones.
And the interesting thing about you, John, too, is that when you do talk about everything in the museum, but when you have a collector that comes in, or somebody has great interest, and you listen to their stories too. So
Yeah.
that I found, very cool, for lack of a better word. But there's so many Ouija boards, and they keep coming out with them. We just, I had the windy one, and then the new Five Below one, and that just come out. But now you have the chunky, chunky. Maybe they will have a chunky. Maybe they'll have a chunky one. But don't laugh. It should come out. Maybe I was predicting the future there. You don't know. Chunky one, or whatever. I mean, do you keep up with all these new Ouija boards, or how do you draw the line?
Yeah, well, when you're a collector, you got to draw a line somewhere. And at this point, my line today is I own two collections. I own what I am most obsessed to collect and hunt down and find. And then I collect what I think people coming to the museum are going to be most interested to want to see and learn about. And so I do buy a lot of the new stuff that comes out. It's personally not something that I hunt for, but the longer you collect, you learn that, you didn't buy something 10 years ago when it came out. And then 10 years later, you're like, oh, why didn't I get that? I could have got it right at the store, and now it's 4 times the price, and now I want it. And so I've kind of just gone with the thing where like, I'll just grab it. And it's better to spend the, $20, $30 on a board coming out now and hold on to it than it is to try to hunt it down years down the road.
Yeah, I ran into that problem with Rob Murch's board that he created, and I did my first conference out in the Houghton Mansion, and Bob gave us a whole case of these of his Ouija boards to give out as prizes and stuff, and so I gave them out, and I kept one of them aside, and I was going to keep for myself, and then Maureen said, "Oh, can I have that?" And I gave it to her, and I said, "Well, I can always pick one up." So I never did. And of course, if you know that the price has risen on those things, but it's like, oh, darn. But eventually, Maureen, I got it back from her. She actually inherited it back to me, so that was good. But yeah, I was kicking myself by that. But I understand what you mean by that, because that's what happens. You get a board. I was like, oh yeah, I'll pick it up some other time. Everything. Nah, grab it when you can.
Yeah, there's a fewer new boards that have come out that I'm not gravitated towards. I think the pop culture ones are an obvious yes, like the new Beetlejuice, the new Exorcist boards,
Oh
the
yeah.
Chucky board you mentioned. Those are, I think those are great because people are going to be interested in them. Some of the Amy Zerner boards, like the Psychic Circle, they're kind of hard because they fold out. They're a little bit harder to display at the museum. And so for those, I haven't been as up on buying every single one that came out. I kind of pick and choose. Although her newest one, I don't own it, but it's pretty interesting because you incorporate crystals with it as well.
Oh well.
So there's like spaces on the board where you lay out different crystals, and I don't know much more about it than that, but it seems to be an interesting concept to take it to another level than just using the alphabet and the numbers.
Yeah, Lesley uses that board,
The
and
Psychic Circle. Yeah.
yep, Psychic Circle, and I inherited one that was supposedly cursed, and we've used on sometimes. So yeah, it's kind of good to have the different collections, but yeah, it's difficult to keep up with them. I mean, you have the Ouija cards too that they had out. I have 2 sets of those, different sets, I believe. Yeah, a blue one, and I think like a maroon and black one, blue and black and white. So I have those 2 sets, but they even have like Ouija coins, and then you can get all the supporting stuff. But the one thing I liked about your museum too is that you had like the posters from the movies and stuff, and you had newspaper articles about different Ouija stories that were true, but that are really you look and you go, wow, I didn't know that. Is there a favorite story or anything that you like to tell over?
Oh, I mean, I have a million stories I love to tell.
Hmm.
Well, you mentioned Robert Murch a little while ago, and
Hmm.
Murch is one of my closest friends. He created that board called the Cryptique Board,
Yep.
and so I have had a lot of adventures with him. Him and I traveling to go find boards. We heard about him. We'll get in a car and drive.
Oh, God bless
One
you.
of our trips was I bought a collection from someone in Florida, and literally within just a couple hours, I rented a car. I picked up Murch in downtown Boston, and we drove 21 hours straight
Oh,
down
God
to
bless you.
Florida to buy the boards. And a lot of funny things that happened. Like they didn't have the minivan because it was last minute, so they gave me a Ford Escalade. So we looked like high rollers pulling up to buy this collection, and it was about 300 boards. It was a really big
Whoa.
collection, and the shorter story is we got the truck loaded and we're driving back. We had worked all day on Friday, then drove 21 hours straight down there. So we had not slept in a while, and we were giddy. We had things that we didn't know still existed, like a board called the Oriole. There was the original box for it. We
Oh,
had
wow.
boards that no other collector had, and just things that we just couldn't believe we were seeing. And so we were pretty giddy on that, but we were laughing like we haven't slept in a long time, and if we get in an accident right now, there's going to be Ouija boards all over the highway. It's going to be the most paranormal investigated space at that time. So that's a fun story, is that how you acquire them, the friendship you have because of these boards, and just those kind of stories I think are pretty interesting, as
But
opposed
John,
to the actual
John, look at it this way: if you had gotten in an accident and got killed, you would have been a new legend.
Oh, I know.
The Ouija boards killed Bob Murch and John Kozik.
The funny thing is driving down there, I had never driven something as nice as a Ford, as an Escalade, and we are driving down there, and like every now and then, like I felt like buzzing in my seat, like a vibration. I was like, what the heck's going on? And Murch wasn't having it on his seat. And but we just drove straight, we didn't stop, we just got
Right.
gas, that was it. And it wasn't until we were driving home that I realized that when you go to change lanes without a directional, it was like a warning signal in the seat that to let you know you were drifting. And
Right.
it's just one of those things that you don't know until you're doing it. But there's so many things like that were happening. Like I have quite a lot of experience traveling, and I've been across the country, dozens of times. And I usually do almost all the driving. And so
Right.
Murch was just a passenger. And when I get 3 in the morning and I'm driving, I do certain things to stay awake, like, punch my leg. And one of the things is, people roll down the window, but I actually like to scream. And Murch didn't know that. So he was pretty relaxed, and I needed to wake up, and I just started screaming. So he had a couple times where he was woken up to me screaming, probably thinking we are gonna crash. But yeah, again, those are some of the fun stories.
AI that thoughtfully
Wow. The yeah.
So, so that's a
Go ahead.
funny story, like in acquiring it. One of the stories in the museum, when people come in, I ask where they visit from, and I want to maybe tell them some kind of Ouija history closest to where they're from. And so it could be something dark, like the first suicide from Bridgeport, Connecticut in the year 1900. A woman who was she was so consumed with the messages she was getting from the board, she actually wanted to find out for herself where the messages were coming from. So she took strychnine and poisoned herself to get to the other side of the Ouija board. But it could be, somebody visiting from California, and I have a
Oh,
board
that's
that was
just good.
made in Burbank or LA, and I want to show off. So I kind of have a lot of stories, and it just starts with like, where are you visiting from? And then I can go from there.
Hmm. Now, one of the stories that always intrigued me was I can never there. I know I was going to screw this up. The something seven about some servicemen that were in Germany, and they were on the Ouija board, and they told them to go to Florida, and they went AWOL. Do you know that story? I forget what it's
Yeah,
called.
I don't know it super well, but I believe that it was during Desert Storm, and the soldiers stationed overseas were using the Ouija. It told them that the second coming was
Yep.
going to happen, but it wasn't. But it was actually aliens that were going to be coming to the Earth, and so they walked out into the desert. They took off. They were eventually captured in Florida. They made it all the way back to the States. They
Yep.
were arrested in Florida. But yeah, the Ouija board told them that the second coming was going to happen, and they believed it enough to go AWOL.
That was, I believe, at least the story I heard was that they were actually not in Desert Storm, but were in Germany and were analysts for the army. I believe they had a high clearance on it. I forget what the heck that was, but I did a presentation on it actually. But you asked me if I could remember it now. But it was an intriguing story how people. I mean, these were fairly intelligent persons that you know virtually risked their whole career, who actually destroyed their whole career over messages through a Ouija board.
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean, that's the Ouija seems to have that power in people. I guess it's what people make of it. I mean, they give the power to the board. In other words, they
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I always tell people, I'm like, you got free will. You know what I mean? Like the Ouija board, you want to find out where messages come from. Like, I don't know. I want to live a long life and die of natural causes. I don't want to speed it up by taking poison,
Right.
Or if the Ouija board tells you to kill someone, you're like, yeah, I need to. So yeah, it's always fun where that line is that, people will do what they're told.
Well,
Now I have to ask.
used,
Go ahead.
sorry, we have used messaging boards on investigations. And in one investigation, we were in a lighthouse and we were talking to this person who identified themselves as Scud. And it was way into the night and we were getting silly. And we thought, Scud missile, so funny. But this guy was like doctor smart. And he told us things that we could verify by looking through historical documents and newspapers. He turned out to be a doctor, but he was a pirate, and his name was Scudmore. And he was telling us that there was gold on the island, and we were in Biddeford Pool in Maine, and there had been Spanish gold found in Biddeford Pool. So some people say, oh, you shouldn't pay attention to what the board tells you, but sometimes it tells you real things.
Yeah, but the thing is, even if with that information, we don't know where that information comes from. It came
That's
through
how
the
it
board.
was presented to us.
Yeah, no, but it came through the board, but we don't really know the source of the information. In other words, we believed it was this fire. I mean, it all very well could be just information that's out there on the Ethernet or whatever the hell it is, and we're able to connect to it if that's the possibility. But
we
it's
connected through the board.
Yeah, I know.
Point is,
Yeah, that's what I mean. But do we connect through the board, or do we connect in our mental state? In other words, the board become a focal point for a mental state that we're able to tap into this information that's always out there? Because we know that, like, for instance, radio signals will go on and forever and ever. They dissipate, which is a lot of times why you can't get clear signal sometimes. But so that could very well be that. But that's another story for another time. We've got our good friend, Mr. John Kozik here of the Salem Witch Museum. Salem Witch Board Museum.
Yes.
Damn it. Anyway, so John, I correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a new Ouija board there that lets you talk to God directly now?
There's a Jesus board that came out about a year or so ago, and there's a YouTube commercial which is pretty funny. I call it satire. I don't know how much they really believed you were going to speak to Jesus with it, but it caused quite a little bit of controversy. And when it first came out, I said, I better grab a couple of these because I don't think it's going to be around very long. Most of the videos and stuff online were a lot of negative comments about it, but yeah, I mean, that was one for Jesus, and again, satire more than likely, but there are boards that are created that people have tried to speak to their guardian angels. There's boards that people have tried to create to speak to their past lives, try to.
There's one that speak to like the devil too.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
they're using it for other things than just one spirit in particular. Yeah, I mean, I like that. A lot of that's more fringe kind of stuff, but I like that people have created these boards for other things than just spirits or just as a fortune telling, just an oracle, where they want you to try to speak to. I mean, Karen, who I mentioned earlier, she can use a regular Ouija board, but she believes that she can communicate with plants and animals through the
Yeah.
Ouija.
Yeah,
So
and there are some people who speak to archangels or whatever through the regular Ouija board as well.
yep.
Uh, Now, before the Ouija board, it really was the planchette, and oh, what's his name? Hodge. What's his name? What's his first name? You know him, uh, John.
Oh, Brandon Hodge.
Brandon Hodge. Thank you very much. He's a big collector of the planchette, right?
Yeah, of automatic writing planchettes. Yes,
Yes.
correct.
Yeah, and so has there been a board where they incorporated the writing planchette into uh, a board type thing?
Yeah, I mean, well, there are automatic writers that came out, by the 1920s that actually came with a piece of paper, and you'd fold this out, and it would have not just the alphabet and numbers, it would have a bunch of words kind of pre-written out, maybe, never, things like that. And
Mhm.
so you could, instead of having the pencil at the front, you're able to take, I guess, the pencil and reverse it so that the special pencil that came with it created like a third leg. So you're using the automatic writing planchette as just a regular planchette with a board that came with it. Then for Ouija and for talking boards, there have been boards that have been created that the planchette could double as an automatic writing planchette. So they make a regular planchette with a little hole at the top where you can then insert a pencil into that and then use it as well. So there are a few of those boards on both sides that have used it for both uses.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. They keep coming up with good ideas and everything. One thing I want to do, and I don't know, maybe you could recommend with us, is we've been studying the red light seance for 14, 15 years, Lesley. Is
Yeah,
that what
about
it is?
15 years now.
15 years. And one of the experiments, of course, it involves physical mediumship, which is a lot of table tipping and that type of thing. We usually do it on a large table. One of the things I was thinking about is there a planchette that has a really good set of wheels on it that would move around if the table was tilted and so forth?
I would think so. I mean, I think there's next time you come to Salem,
Mhm.
there's a store called Pentagram, and
Yep.
they actually sell some like newer automatic writing planchettes. They're one of the few places that, besides online, like an actual brick and mortar store that sells the automatic writers. And they're newer, but they use ball bearing casters on the bottom.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think with that would be something that you might want to try using for what you're thinking, as
Mhm.
opposed to the wheels, because the wheels, the way they can spin around, I think they can, if it's too abrupt, that the wheel
Mhm.
might be on its side and more drag, not necessarily move.
Right,
So,
exactly.
so the ball bearing might be a good option to do something like that. And I know that pentagram in particular has the newer ones with those on there.
Oh, good. I'll have to check that out because that's something I do want to try. I find it most interesting because we like to reproduce some of the experiments of the early researchers and see if we get the same results or if we can validate them at all, basically. So
Oh, that's awesome. I
yeah,
love that. The
uh,
automatic writing planchettes, because most of them are vintage, antique, they go for a lot of money. So,
yeah, I
you know,
understand that.
anything, like I said, there's a few newer ones, but as far as like an antique or vintage is gonna probably be like as new as like 1920,
Yeah,
and that's gonna start probably minimum $500.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
finding
We
something new is a better option.
we did a spirit quest one year. I do an event. We've done it for I don't know 14 years or something like 15 years. I don't know. It's every year at the end of September, and it's a weekend. And one of the workshops we did one year was on the writing planchette, where I actually made these planchettes out of not poster board. What do you call that stuff? That's like a
Home core?
Yeah, that stuff there with felt underneath it, and we had the hole for the pen, and people used them. It was kind of interesting, So you can make up your own planchettes too, which is kind of fun as well. Uh, a lot of people, I know. I think Jason used to make up his own boards as well. Did I believe at one time? Oh, I don't know. I'm thinking of Danny. Danny Perez used to make his boards.
Yeah, Danny makes his boards now. He does great stuff.
Yeah,
But
makes
then
it out of coffin wood.
yes, a lot of times, yeah, yeah. He themes them to maybe a serial killer or a certain pop culture movie or something like that.
Yeah.
He does a lot of cool stuff. But for
Yeah.
the planchette, you know, if you just want to use the board, you don't have to go and buy something expensive. You don't have to go to the store. A lot of people will use a coin, a shot glass upside down, or
Yep.
even a wine glass. So, there are plenty of things in the house that you can just take a piece of paper, write out the alphabet, and use on your own without having to go buy something expensive.
Yeah, glass swirling. It was an experiment that someone taught me from the UK, and I actually designed a large tabletop for it, where it has all the Ouija numbers and letters and stuff on it, so that when you do glass swirling, you can actually spell out things as well, or do numbers or words or stuff. So it's pretty cool, and it glows in the dark as well.
Oh, even better. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So Lesley used that at Sparrow Coast one year too, and you had pretty good results, Lesley, didn't you?
Yeah, we had very good results with it. We had lots of communication on that board that night.
All right, John. I hate to say this, but we've actually run out of time.
Oh, okay.
I enjoyed talking with you, so I could go on for hours, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you're getting tired too. But anyways, I want to thank you so much. Go visit John. He's at the Salem Witch Board Museum. I did say it right, I believe.
You did.
It's on what street?
Essex Street, right on the main street.
I was going to say that. I was afraid I was going to be wrong. Oh, too much pressure. Anyways, thank you, John, so much for joining us today, and it was a pleasure meeting you the other day again. So, yep, thank you. If you ever get something new you'd like to talk to us about, or you're going to sponsor an event or whatever. Oh, where's your store in where's your museum in Baltimore? Quickly.
Baltimore, I opened it in the Hamden neighborhood, which is my favorite neighborhood in Baltimore. It's got all the great restaurants and like cafes and antique shops, record stores. But I'm on Chestnut, right at the corner of 36th, and the Hamden neighborhood, above a store called Bazaar, which is an oddity store that sells like taxidermy and stuff.
Of course it is.
So you see them, and then they give you access to the museum upstairs.
All right, that's awesome, John. And check it out if for our listeners are in that area, or are you going to that area? So, John, thank you once again. You have a great night, and
we'll great talking to both of you. Don't be strangers. Come by the museum anytime.
Oh, I
Thank
will
you so
sometime.
much.
All right,
Definitely. I got to get one of those planchettes anyways from that store. So,
perfect. I'll see you soon.
Yep. Take care.
Right,
so, you've been listening to Ghost Chronicles Medium Rare Edition right here on TogiNet, and we'll be back next week for something else. Good night, everyone. God bless and stay safe.
Bye-bye.